Pay cuts and partisanship. Mayor Mike Duggan talks about the moment he decided to leave the Democratic Party and the issues he thinks are top of mind for Michiganders. Looming in Lansing, two state lawmakers making the drive east on I-96 to talk about the biggest issues under the Capitol Dome. This is Flashpoint.
Happy Sunday, everybody. Huge news this week in the trade war, and it came on Monday when the U.S. and China called a tariff timeout, each lowering taxes on imports by 115% for 90 days. But after a month of hikes, the damage may already be done, as Walmart announced this week. It's raising prices as early as this month. Now, the president announced some big business deals during his Middle East trip this week, but all the talk was about this, the $400 million gift from the Qatari government, a palatial jumbo jet to be used as Air Force One and then gifted to the Trump library. The president had this to say to those that call it a bribe.
I thought it was a beautiful gesture. Now, there are those that say we shouldn't be accepting gifts to the Defense Department, and I would say only a stupid person would say that.
Perhaps, but there's also an old saying, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And oh, by the way, those so-called stupid people aren't all Democrats. Some are the president's most ardent supporters, so we'll have to wait and see about the jet. Other news and notes, the first black speaker of the Michigan State House, now hoping to be the first black U.S. senator in state history. Joe Tate making his run official this week, as did Ellie Savitt, the Washtenaw County prosecutor, making his bid official for Attorney General. And did you see this week? Yes, that's Congresswoman Debbie Dingell going viral for nodding off in a marathon House hearing on Medicaid. She said she'd been awake for 31 straight hours fighting to save Medicaid and only closed her eyes to imagine a world with affordable health care. Okay, let's get to my interview this week with Mayor Mike Duggan. Running as an independent, he flatly answers his critics about his motives in leaving the Democratic Party.
Mayor Mike Duggan, welcome back to Flashpoint. Great to see you. I was trying to think of an interesting way to ask you, as I ask everyone, why are you running for governor? I came across the salary, so I'll ask it this way. Why are you interested in taking a $43,000 pay cut?
Well, I took a lot bigger pay cut when I went from running a hospital system to being mayor, but sometimes there's something inside you that says, I feel like I can make a difference. And I felt like that when I was in the medical center. I felt like that when I was the mayor, and hopefully people in Detroit agree with that.
What do you think the biggest issue is right now facing the entire state?
The toxic partisanship is killing us. I mean, you look at what's happening, our children in the classroom that have gone from 19th in the country in fourth graders reading now to 44th. Over 25 years, Republicans and Democrats. You look at what's happened on our business climate, worst population performance in the country for kids under the age of 30. And it's been a lot of Republicans and Democrats fighting and finger pointing and not a lot of problem solving. And of course, you've seen what we've done in Detroit when we stopped fighting with each other and started to build.
You brought up kind of the partisanship, and obviously you're an independent now, leaving the Democratic Party. And you've talked about why you just talked about it, but I'm wondering, was there a moment where you said to yourself, I'm done with the Democratic Party?
You know, I'd say over the last year or two, it got to the point where if you were not politically correct, didn't use the right words, you got attacked. But of course, you know, the Republican Party has the same issue on the right. But I just look at, just in the last couple of weeks, I just feel so good about it. We had a day when I stood up with the Republican Speaker, Matt Hall, for more funding for cops and got attacked by Curtis Hertel, the Democratic Party chair, for being with that evil Matt Hall. The next day, Gretchen Whitmer is standing up next to Matt Hall in the Oval Office with Donald Trump. And all of a sudden, the Democrats trying to figure out, well, what do we do? And you watch what Gretchen Whitmer has done to save Selfridge and the thousands of jobs at stake, and she's been under attack from the Democrats. How dare you work with the president to save jobs in Macomb County? And this is the kind of nonsense I think most people are tired of.
Yeah, I think you feel like you're saying the party's changed. You haven't changed. To the Republican voter out there who says, I don't buy it,
this is just strategy, he's still a Democrat at heart? What's your answer to that?
Yeah, I don't really worry too much about that. If you came and sat with me before I announced it, if we had lunch anywhere in the suburbs, there's a line of people who come up to me and say, I'm a Republican, but I support you. Anybody in southeastern Michigan who has seen what happened in the city of Detroit, who knew what it was like 12 years ago with the highest murder rate, highest unemployment rate in the country, there was nothing to do downtown, and now you see the way the city's been transformed by the mayor and the council working together and not fighting with each other. I think in the Tri-County area there is a lot of confidence that this is the right kind of leadership.
You brought up education earlier, and among your successes in Detroit, the education system, the public school system, the biggest in the state, still is struggling. For voters who might see that and say, you weren't able to fix that, how can I trust you to fix the statewide education problems?
I think most people in Michigan understand mayors are not in charge of schools. You have an elected school board. It's the one thing I'm not in charge of. And there's no doubt that schools are holding Detroit back, but it's not just Detroit. 60% of fourth graders across Michigan don't read at grade level.
How do we fix it?
And so if you look at what happened last week, for the first time ever, a majority of school bond issues failed across the state. The people of the state have completely lost confidence. But we fix it the same way I turned around the Detroit Medical Center and the same way I turned around the city of Detroit. You have a clear plan that says, here's the curriculum. You don't change. You had 2 years ago, they changed the reading curriculum. Then they changed and added entrepreneurial tests. Then they added something else. The legislature just 2 weeks ago voted on whether to change Algebra 2 in a curriculum. And the teachers tell me, between the Republican and Democrat fighting over what the curriculum is, from 1 year to the next, you keep changing your materials and changing your coursework. We need to have a clear curriculum. There has to be accountability in the schools. There has to be accountability building by building and district by district. And I know what it means to walk into a system that's failing and say, we're going to stop fighting with each other. We're going to do something that's in the best interest of the kids.
The per pupil funding has gone up for the government now at an all-time high.
Right.
Fair to say that spending hasn't gotten our way out of that. The governor's been wrong trying to tackle it that
I
way?
wouldn't say she's wrong. Of course, you've had a big expansion in charter schools, and yet the reading levels have gone down. I'm not saying the charter school people are wrong. I'm saying you're in a system that has no clear plan. This state in 2006 went to a merit curriculum, and they knocked out all the career technical education and killed kids' paths to skilled trades. They said, oh no, we made a mistake there, and they went and changed it again. They've changed from A, B, C, D, F grading of schools to no grading of schools to percentage grading of schools.
Would you grade the schools?
I would have a single standard of accountability. I'd have it in place for 5 years. I'd get the teachers and the principals to buy in. I'd get Republicans and Democrats to buy in, and I'd say, for the next 5 years, we are investing in this reading program. We'll teach phonics. We will have small groups for the kids falling behind. We will have after-school tutors. Let's hire college kids to come in and do this. And we're going to stick with the curriculum for 5 years and drive change. When Mississippi can go from the bottom of the pack to the top by having a consistent plan, and Michigan's going the other direction, that's what we need to do. But I understand what it takes to take a culture that's broken and get everybody to pull together the same direction.
We've mentioned the governor a little bit, one of your allies in your time as mayor. Now that you're an independent, you're probably free to say, are there some things that she's done that you would have done differently specifically?
You know, I think Gretchen Whitmer is doing the best anybody can do in a partisan environment. But look at what happens. If a Democratic governor proposes something, all the Republicans line up against it. If the Republicans put something in, all the Democrats line up against it. And you saw Gretchen Whitmer vetoed 9 Democratic bills from lame duck. The Democratic Party's gone so far left. She has to deal with it. But I look at what she's doing right now. What she pulled off with Selfridge on a bipartisan effort was great, and the Democrats went nuts on her. She's trying to bring 10,000 manufacturing jobs to Flint in partnership with Trump. If she gets that done, the Democrats are really going to go crazy. But the great majority of people in this state actually want their governor to do what's right for Michigan and not get into the partisan stuff. And you're watching a Gretchen Whitmer who knows she doesn't have to run in a Democratic primary in 2 years, who is, I think, becoming even more effective than she was. And I think it shows that if you get away from the partisanship, you can get things done for people.
You think being an independent gives you the advantage there?
Oh, no doubt about it. You look at what's going to happen, and I call the Michigan election system basically roulette. You're either betting all red or all blue, and you spin the little wheel, and the state's divided 50-50. It's going to go 50-50 one election to the next, and there's no consistency. But I'm not going to back Republican or Democratic candidates, just as I didn't back individual council candidates. I said, I'm going to build a relationship and work with the people who get elected. And there are people of goodwill on both sides. We just got to get the toxic atmosphere out of it.
Yeah. Doge department at the federal level ever consider doing that at the state level? Is there waste? Is there misspending that you would want to get out of the state government?
Again, I actually have experience, right? I went into a Detroit Medical Center, lost $100 million a year for 5 years, and put together 9 straight years of surpluses. I went into a city of Detroit that was bankrupt and put together 12 straight years of surpluses and 10 credit rating upgrades. It's because you don't come in and spend 2 days and announce a bunch of cuts. That what you do is decide what your priorities are, you look very closely at what's got value and what doesn't, and you change it. And so you'll see me, the turnaround of the city of Detroit has been done off a $2 billion budget. The state of Michigan has an $85 billion budget. If you like what you've seen me do in Detroit with a $2 billion budget, the state of Michigan has enormous upside.
I'm sure you're in it to win it, but I would have to ask, if you get down to crunch time, would you ever consider dropping out if it becomes clear that you're only going to be a spoiler from one candidate to the other?
Again, from everything I'm seeing already, polling shows I'm already winning in the Tri-County area. My problem is that my main opponents have run statewide before, and I have not. But I am now spending a lot of time in farmhouses in rural areas. I'm going every part of the state, just like I did when I ran for mayor and went to houses in every corner of the city.
What's your message in those houses, by the way?
And I'm saying to them, you think you've been left behind and the mayor of Detroit can't relate to you? Let me tell you what the people of Detroit can tell you about being left behind in a city with 47,000 abandoned houses and 20% unemployment rate. And when I go up to Traverse City, you know what their number one problem is? Affordable housing. They got 200 people living in tents because the vacationers have priced the property out. And when I show them how we built $1.3 billion in affordable housing in Detroit and say to them, we don't have tent cities in Detroit, they can't believe it.
Yeah.
And I think most people in the state would be surprised that the biggest tent city in Michigan is in Traverse City and there is not one in Detroit. And as we start to talk about, here's our common issues, here's how we address them, we find we have a lot more in common than people might think.
Mayor, thanks very much. We always appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
And good luck. More Flashpoint coming up right after this. Let's dive into some of the pressing issues in Lansing with our guest this morning, Republican Representative Mark Tisdale of Rochester Hills and Democratic Senator Darren Camilleri of Trenton. Guys, good morning. Thanks for being here. I'll politely call it a divisive year in Lansing with the way things have gone. I want to start with the budget, and it looks like the divisiveness is starting to push close to that July 1st deadline, and which would kind of get us to September. I'll start with you, Darren. Do you think this is going to lead to possibly shutting down Michigan eventually?
Well, it shouldn't. I mean, the Senate has passed our budget this week. We've sent it over to the House as of Thursday. So we are on time. We are ready to negotiate and get to a budget deal. There's no reason why we can't get this done by July 1st, which is something that we've been focused on for the last 2 years under the last 2 sessions. And I think even under Republican leadership, we've been able to get this budget done by July 1st. So I think that we are ready to go. It's just we have not seen that same level of commitment to a timeline from the House representatives.
The Speaker, Mark, said he called that budget crazy. Do you agree with that?
I haven't really looked at their budget that came over. I've been focused on some other things very recently, but I agree with the senator. There's absolutely no reason for any threat of government interruption during this process or at the end of it. We passed a fail-safe or an emergency budget back in March that would pay critical salaries and keep the lights on. On the House side, there are multiple subcommittees. Appropriations have been broken up into multiple subcommittees that are looking at this closely, as the senator indicated earlier.
Do you think we'll hit that July 1st statutory deadline that's in place?
I don't see why we can't.
Okay.
But the revenue estimates are just being addressed today, and it should clear the path for making effective budget decisions soon.
Does it feel like this is a stickier process, I'll come to you, Senator, with this one, than it has been in the last few years, where it seemed like it was done no problem? I know this is a different legislature, but is that playing a part of this?
I mean, typically you see both chambers working on their versions of the budget at the same time. We just have not seen that. We passed a record investment in public schools, which I'm very proud to have been the chair of that budget. I'm looking forward to seeing what we can come up with. I think in the past we've done bipartisan good work on funding our schools. There's no reason, again, why we can't get that done this time, but we have not seen their product. The product that the representative just mentioned actually cuts funding to public schools by $5 billion. That's not a fail-safe. That is an attempt to fund only one item of the school budget. We passed a $21 billion school budget. That fail-safe that he's referencing was only $15 billion. That's a massive difference that would effectively lay off teachers. I don't consider that something that's a fail-safe.
Well, the foundation grant in our fail-safe or partial budget is pretty much exactly about $25 per student more than what was just passed on the Senate side. That $5 billion that he's talking about in categoricals, couple hundred or more specified areas, that's all being held. But again, this was a pay critical salaries, keep the lights on, just in case, backstop.
To make sure there's no shutdown.
Correct.
But the reality of that, though, there would be consequences to the budget if that was the document that...
If that was the document.
Right, but we're talking about no funding for school lunches.
That's a big if.
No funding for mental health in schools, or excuse me,
I'll
not
leave
that,
it
but
at
for the at-risk funding for students. I mean, these are critical services that go out to our kids. That means counselors. That
Many
means
of those
teachers.
critical services were cut by 92% in the last budget that was passed. So we'll just, the senator's correct. If that were the budget to go in place, and that's a big if.
That's the big safety net.
Right.
Does infrastructure also play a part in whatever slowdown is perceived here? I know Speaker Hall has his eyes set on cutting as much as he can to somehow pay for his roads plan, if that ends up being the plan.
Well, it's redirecting funds based on priorities. There's plenty of money there in the budget. Since fiscal year 1920, our state budget, excluding any federal dollars, is about $4.25–4.5 billion in excess of the rate of inflation. There's plenty of money in Lansing right now. It just needs to be redirected with some priorities. And both sides of the aisle, both chambers and the governor, want to do something with roads. It's just a question of how to fund it.
And I know, Senator, you dove into education there, and I know you guys both have strong feelings on a lot of different ways to improve education in Michigan because, let's be honest, Michigan is struggling when it comes to education statewide. You just put out a plan recently. Why is your plan better than what's worked in years past when the scores, the outcomes have gone down?
I mean, when we're looking at education generally, we can't see a silver bullet that fixes the problem in 1 or 2 years. So in the last 2 years, we've spent record money back to our classrooms. That means higher salaries for educators. That means more resources like the free breakfast and lunch program for kids. And one thing that we're really excited about is that we've increased investment in districts that need it the most. So districts like Detroit Public Schools. In my budget that we passed this week, they will receive $50 million more on this budget alone, which means they can address class sizes, they can address teacher pay disparities, and when you put this all into perspective, having talented teachers in our most needy classrooms will help us fix those long-term educational outcomes that we all want to see improved.
Representative, I know you're huge on getting cell phones out of school. Talk about that.
Yes, I am.
That's got to be a key to you in taking scores, because if you look at the graph, sometimes it's like cell phone use is going this way, scores are going that way.
Yeah. Well, once you get into your brain that the cell phone and these social media apps are addictive, once you can get that into your brain, and Governor Hochul, when she announced
in New York,
statewide bell-to-bell prohibition, right, in New York, just a week or so ago, she used the word addictive. So the question becomes, where do you allow young school children to walk around with an addictive device in their pocket? And certainly during instruction time and during the school day is not the place. It's common sense. the science is there, the research is there, and so it's just the political will to get something that's really effective and has some teeth in it across the finish line. I'm thrilled that the governor included it in her State of the State address. I'm thrilled that the Senate has passed a bill and sees that it is an initiative that needs to be addressed immediately. Now it's just a question of what's the best way to do it.
Senator, you see an education plan coming together before the governor leaves office or at the end of this year?
At least on cell phone policy, I think that we've got some similarities and some common ground here. I'm not exactly sure the representative's bill and how it's different from the bill that we passed out of the Senate, but ideally we can come together and find a solution on that issue, because it is a problem, right? You've got kids who are distracted in the classroom and they're not paying attention. So when you put everything together, yes, they're not exactly achieving to the levels that we need them to. Addressing cell phones can be one piece of that solution.
And there are very significant differences in the bill, if I can jump in here.
Sure.
Very similar to Ohio and California, the Senate bill is a recommendation. It's a request. Words like seek to limit or policies that may reduce. Ohio and California went down that route and have just put in bills that are almost identical to the one that I've put forward that passed the House Education Committee with bipartisan votes. It establishes statewide standards, K through 8 bell-to-bell prohibition, high school prohibition during instruction time. And actually, administrators, principals, teachers want that because they want to know that the state has their back in case there is any pushback from parents.
That seems to be a universal kind of theme, whether it's the candidates, parents, everybody in the state. Let's get the education on the right track. I got to leave it there, guys.
Indeed.
Thanks so much. Great conversation as always.
You.
Back after this on Flashpoint. This week, Major League Baseball reinstated several players from the ineligible list, including the great Pete Rose. The game's all-time hits leader would have been an easy first-ballot Hall of Famer had he not bet on games when he was manager of the Cincinnati Reds. Now he and others like Shoeless Joe Jackson, who was part of the Black Sox team that threw the World Series in 1919, are eligible to be voted into Cooperstown. But this morning, 4 reasons why Pete Rose should not be in the Hall of Fame. Number one, just because Rose died doesn't mean his lifetime ban is up. Shoeless Joe, who we just mentioned, has been dead for 74 years, and he's just now being reinstated despite always having a better case against the gambling allegations. Number two, Pete Rose is already in the Hall of Fame. His helmet from his 1973 MVP season, his bat from the 44-game hitting streak in '78, and his cleats from when he became the all-time hits king all sit in Cooperstown. And if they simply added a plaque stating why he was never inducted, really, that should be enough, don't you think? 3, Pete has nothing to do with the other players on the outs for steroids, but people like to conflate that. If you're a baseball purist and believe guys like Bonds and McGuire sullied the game's integrity, that's fine, but they never broke any rule. There was no sign that hung in every clubhouse saying, if you take drugs, you're banned for life. There is one sign like that for gambling. Which leads to the last and most important point here. Gambling is baseball's third rail, the cardinal rule never to be broken without severe consequences. Allowing Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame now, at a time when gambling is at every player's fingertips, if they so choose, would be a very dangerous message to send. I'm going to take a wild guess and say a few of you disagree with that take, and I'm happy to read and respond to any and all emails. I'm Jason Colthorpe. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you later.